Well, thanks again for being here with us today. I'll tell you what, I know Mike didn't like the snow, but my kids were really excited when we saw the snow today, and it works out really nice when you come and you put decorations up that have snowflakes, and then Natalie did a great job of picking the background, and we got snow outside. It just worked, right? It was all good. So we're thankful that you got here, and thanks to nobody asking me if we had church today, and texting me that question, and being well. Thanks to those of you who braved the snow. If you're hanging out at home, good. I'm glad you're connecting with us. It's awesome. But I'm super thankful that you guys braved the snow and you are here today. It's awesome to be with you. My name is Corey. I have the honor and privilege of being the lead pastor here at GFC. And it's an exciting time of year. Of course, I said all that. The decorations look great and everything. It would make perfect sense to slide right into a Christmas series. We're not there yet. Next week, we will dive into our Christmas series. But this is the last week of the series we've been calling Who. And it's this idea, the search for identity. And the way that we've kind of connected this, in case you haven't been here, you're connecting with us online for the first time, is we have built this conversation around how do we understand who God is. So we talked about that for the first 2 weeks. Talked about who God is, why we believe he exists, how we can know him. We transitioned in the middle week. We talked about Jesus and how we know and understand him. And then last week we started the conversation about, in light of those things, knowing and understanding who God is, who Jesus is, how we understand who we are. And last week we talked about the idea, just why do we exist? Why is that the case? Why did God create us? And so if you missed any of those weeks, I would encourage you go back, listen, kind of connect those pieces. But today's the final week, and we're going to walk through an idea that's a little bit different, but I think it's where we need to go in light of understanding who we are and who God is. And so before we dive into that, I want to remind us of the follow along. So if you want to scan the QR code that's on the screen, or you go to our website, all the verses, all the notes will be on the screens for you, even if you're watching at home. But if you would like to follow along with the sermon at home or on your phone or your tablet, you can do that at the follow along right there on our website. So this is what we've done every week. I've kind of started with a question just to kind of get us thinking and processing the idea that we're going to talk about. This is the question we're going to ask today. What does God want from me? What does he want from me? We think about this. We think about, okay, maybe I understand or I believe that God exists. I know that I want to understand the world through who he is and all that stuff. And so then we talked about why we exist. And okay, he created me. But then how do I live this out? What is God actually looking for from me as a person that he created? And how do I respond to that? This is what we're going to dig into this week. I think that this is true, and it will help us understand kind of where we're going to go today. I think this is true. In every relationship, we decide whether or not we want to make the other person happy or not. We decide every relationship, and I don't mean romantic relationship. I don't mean just like, when you're dating or married. I mean any relationship at all. Anytime you come into a connection with another person, we decide whether we want to make that person happy or not. Do I want to do the things that they want me to do? I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say you get a new boss, right? So you had an old boss. Maybe you liked them. Really, maybe you didn't like them, but you've got a new one now. And you meet them for the first time, and they're really nice. They connect with you. They shake your hand. They ask you about your family. They ask you, whatever. And you're like, this is great. They're very nice. They're very kind, whatever. And then the next day, that person comes to you, and they go, hey, I have something I would really like you to help me with, and they ask you to do something for them. If you had a really good first interaction with that person, you're way more inclined, right, to be like, yeah, I'll help you out. You were nice to me. You were kind. You asked me about my family, all that stuff. I'm willing to do that, right? If you meet your boss for the first time and they are standoffish, they don't look you in the eye, they're kind of annoyed that you're there, they don't really want to know about you, they don't seem very interested in their own job, much less your job, all that stuff. They come to you the next day, you're like, I guess, I'll do what you're asking me to do, right? It just changes the dynamic. This can happen with teachers. You might have a teacher that you have on the first day and they give you the syllabus and this is what you're going to learn about and this is how it's going to go. And you're like, okay, great, this is good stuff. And they seem nice and they're like, hey, just make sure you're giving the effort. And if you ever need help, give me a call and, all of that stuff. And then maybe you've got a teacher that's like, you better show up on time, be ready, and don't ask me any questions, right? And you're like, great. Then you're like, I don't even want to do what you want me to do. This syllabus isn't fun. This class isn't going to go well. I don't want to be here, all that kind of stuff, right? Okay. What about when you are dating somebody? And you start to kind of connect the dots and you get to know them and you start to think, okay, am I going to lean into this relationship a little bit more? And you start to talk about where they want to live and what they want to do with their what kind of house they want and, what state they even want to live in. And you start to ask this question, is that what I want as well? Is that something that I want to do. In every relationship, at some point, you're going to ask yourself, do I actually want to do what's going to make the other person happy? And sometimes we will decide, no, I actually don't want to. And if it's that case with your job, the boss you have, you might decide, I'm going to go to another job, right? I don't want to do what they want me to do, and so I'm going to find a different one. Maybe you're dating someone and they say they want to live in Alaska. You're like, I want to live in Florida, right? I don't want to do what's going to make them happy. So you know what? Unfortunately, even if things were going well, I don't think this is going to work out, right? You make that decision, and when you lock in, you say, I actually do want to do what's going to make you happy. I do want what you want from me, and what you want from me and what I want, they are syncing up. That's when relationships get really, really good. And we have to ask this question when we're thinking about God as well. Do we actually want to do what's going to make God happy? I think a lot of people, more people than realize, actually answer this question with their actions, and everybody kind of processes this question maybe in a little bit of a different way. A lot of people will get to the place where they might say something like this. They might say, if, capital IF, right, if God is up there, I want him to be happy with me. They'll say, if he's really there, right? Let's just pretend like maybe I don't believe necessarily, I don't go to church all the time, or I don't ascribe to one religion. But like, if God's up there, I hope that he's happy with me. And maybe they'll start to think about, well, how do I know that that's going to be the case? And they'll start to do things like, well, I hope, or they'll say things like, I hope I've done enough good things to be on God's good side. As though when you get up to heaven, God's going to have a scale, and he's got like jelly beans or marbles, and he'll take everything good that you've done and he'll drop it on one side, everything bad you've done and put it on the other, and you just kind of hope the good side wins, right? Maybe by like a half a jelly bean you get on God's good side, right? We all know, like if we really think about that, if God did that, we would all be terrified standing there, right? I mean, if we're honest with ourselves. We would go, I really hope those good jelly beans are double the weight of the bad jelly beans, right? Because we know that's not the way it's, and yet we kind of think this way sometimes. If he's up there, I just hope he's happy. I just hope I've done enough things that when God looks at me, he's actually happy with me. And it creates this idea. I think we have, as humans, kind of created this idea of this good-bad scenario where we're trying to weigh out our relationship with God and figure out what he wants from us. But ultimately, I think that this is true. That God actually wants transformation and not transaction. He wants transformation, not transaction. Those scales, there's going to be conversation. There's going to be judgment that happens for what we've done. It's not going to be scales, though. It's not going to work that way. But there's a way that we can understand and know and have a relationship with God that actually transforms us instead of hoping one day the scales tip in our favor. And that's what I want to talk about today. We're going to start in Micah chapter 6. We're going to go through verses 6 through 8. And we're going to walk through this, then we'll get to the New Testament in a little bit. But Micah chapter 6, in verse 6, it says this. It says, what can we bring to the Lord? Should we bring him burnt offerings? Should we bow before God Most High with offerings of yearling calves? Should we offer him thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Should we sacrifice our firstborn children to pay for our sins? Now, just kind of think this through. Some of this doesn't make sense to any of us. Let me help us understand. Okay, so the first thing they asked for, should we bring burnt offerings? This was kind of the normal thing. Sometimes this was done daily. Burnt offerings kind of just happened, and depending on how much money you had actually, was what depended on what burnt offering you brought. So if you didn't have a lot of money, you would do something cheaper like doves. If you had more money, you would do things like lambs and things like that. So you would have this burnt offering. But then they go to the next level, and they go to, should we bow before God Most High with offerings of yearling calves? This was a big sacrifice. This one was worth a lot of money. So this was kind of the next level up. Well, then they keep going, right? Should we bring yearly calves? Then he says, should we offer him thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Now, first of all, most of us are like, I don't want that much olive oil ever, but this was worth a lot of money to them, okay? So the idea is they just kind of keep escalating the offering, and they're starting, it's kind of funny how crazy they're getting, right? And then they go to the last one, right? Should we sacrifice our firstborn children to pay for our sins? Obviously, this is a bad idea. Don't do this, right? But they were kind of just escalating and saying, what can we give? And it's honestly this ridiculousness of of what we're reading is the point. To say, what can we actually offer God? We could just keep escalating and giving more and more things to the point where we would all go, that's a bad idea. God doesn't even want us to do that. But they keep going. They're asking the question. And I think that oftentimes, even though we look at this and we get to the point of the last sentence there and we go, that would be ridiculous. Here's what I think can happen. We often think we can bring actions or offerings to satisfy God. We often think we can bring offerings or actions and satisfy God. We think if we just do the right thing enough times, we make sure we're at church the right amount, we make sure we dress the right way, we make sure we sing the right songs, we make sure we give enough money, we make sure we serve on the right team, we make sure we do all that, we think we can make God happy. We think if we just kind of live life the way we're supposed to, maybe in the back of our brains, we're still kind of thinking about that scale thing where we hope we can just kind of tip it in the right direction. And if we just do these right things, it will satisfy God. God will be happy with us, and we don't have to worry about him being angry at us. And even though they didn't have this back then, I think it's easy for us today to kind of think through it this way. I think it is often tempting to treat God like a subscription service. I think it would work better this way. The way that subscription services go, right, we might think about it this way. If we just do the thing or make sure we pay the money or make sure we sign up on the thing, it's just taken care of and God will just do his thing and he'll make sure we have what we need. If I just make sure I do the right stuff and pay the right amount or whatever, it will show up. And then what happens with a subscription service when it doesn't do what it's supposed to do and we paid the money for it to do it? Well, we get mad at the subscription service, right? We want, if the internet's been out for a week, we want our internet service to be like, hey, here's some money back because it didn't work for a while. If YouTube and ESPN can't get their situation right and we can't watch a football game, we're mad and we want our $20. Some of you know what I'm talking about, some of you don't. But it's just one of those things, right? We want, when the subscription service doesn't do what we want it to do, we get mad at the subscription service. It's also easy to find ourselves in a place where we go, God, I've done everything you've asked of me, and now things aren't going the way I want to, so now I'm mad at God. Because we treat him like a subscription service. And we think if we just do the right thing, pay the right amount of money, he'll just show up. And ultimately it turns into this, and this is the problem. We think that if I give fill in the blank, then what do I get? If I make sure I do all the right things, what am I going to get out of it? Is God really going to do what I think he should do? Is God going to provide what I think he should provide? Is God going to make sure the bad things don't happen that I actually don't want to happen? And we get in this frame of mind, I think a lot of people in this frame of mind, where it's not what does God want from me or what does he expect of me, but it's what do I expect from God? And what do I want from him? And is it worth what I give in order for me to get it? But if we go to verse 8 in Micah 6, the answer to the first two verses is there. It says, "Know, O people, the Lord has told you what is good. And this is what he requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." He lays it out simply, to do what is right, to love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. On the next slide, we just have the three lined out, right? Do what is right, love mercy, walk humbly. So do, love, and walk. I want to take a few minutes and walk through these three things and help us to understand them from the rest of Scripture as well, how we can understand and put this together. So here's the first one. Do what is right. There's a couple of other verses I just want to show you. We'll have two verses. They're short verses up on the screen here for us. The first verse is Proverbs 21, verse 3. This is what it says. "The Lord is more pleased when we do what is right and just than when we offer him sacrifices." Just think about that for a minute. The Lord is more pleased. God is happier with us and more pleased with us when we do what is right and just than when we bring sacrifices. That it's not just about like we go back to Micah 6 and we think about the burnt offerings and the yearling calves and all that stuff. That's not what's most important. What's most important is when we say we're going to do what God has called us to do. If we go to 2 Thessalonians 3:13, that's what it says. "As for the rest of you, dear brothers and sisters, never get tired of doing good." Maybe you've been here before, and it feels like you are the one who's always doing what's right. Other people, not so much. Other people at work don't show up on time, they're not prepared. You're always on time, you're always prepared. Other kids in the class, you've always got your work done in the group project, you're always putting forth effort. There's somebody else in the group project just sitting there, hanging out, riding off your coattails, right? Maybe you were the sibling at home that was never in trouble. It was always the firstborns that were never in trouble, right? Okay, well, some people. My grandmother just was like, yeah, right. Okay, so we were we just got away with it, right? And then we blame the younger ones. Anyway, so you're the one who's always doing what's right. And eventually it gets to the point where I don't want to do what's right anymore. I'd rather get away with doing if they're going to get away with it, I'd rather get away with it. Or if I don't have to do it that way, I don't have to put in all this work, I don't want to do it that way. But this is what it says. Never get tired of doing good. Why? Because God is pleased when we do what is right and what is just. And he's more pleased with us then than when we offer sacrifices. I think this is the way I would love for us to understand it. That to love God is to choose what is right, even when it's not what we would naturally choose. To choose what is right, even when it's not what we would naturally choose. Very easy for us to choose what we would naturally choose, right? We want what we want. We know in this situation, this is how we would respond. This is how we would handle it. This is what we think is right and just. And God doesn't say, do what you think is right and just and I'll be happy with you. He says, do what I think is right and just and I will be pleased with you. And even when it's not what we would naturally choose to do, when we say, I will do what God is asking me to do rather than just what I would choose to do, it shows that we love him and understand him and we want a relationship with him. So that was do what is right. Let's think about loving mercy. So when we think about this, there's two verses again. We'll have them up at the screen at the same time. Nice short verses. Luke 6:36 simply says this. You must be compassionate just as your Father is compassionate. When Luke does this, Paul does this a bunch. He gives these ideas. He says, this is what you're supposed to do. And then he sets the standard. And the standard is often God or Jesus. Why do they do that? Because, well, first of all, that's who we're supposed to follow. But it also puts us in a place where we can't just say, yeah, but. Like if the standard is, this is what God does for you, so you have to do it for other people, there's no way around it. It's not like he's just saying, well, this is what I would do, so this is what you should do. Because then we could look at Luke and we could say, well, that's just what you say, Luke. Why is that what I should do? But he doesn't say, he said, this is what we're called to, that we should be compassionate, just as our Father is compassionate. He records Jesus' words here and helps us understand this is what we're called to do. And then James 2:13, this is what it says. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. But if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you. Now, it's tempting to read this and go, oh no, I have to do all the right things or God's going to be happy with me. We can read it that way. That's actually not the way we're supposed to understand it. This is the way we're supposed to understand it. If we understand the mercy and compassion God has had on us, we will then turn that around and give it to other people. And the way that we understand whether we get the idea of mercy and compassion and forgiveness is whether we give it to other people. This is where Jesus would give the parable of the person who goes and he owes a ton of money. And the lender says, you are forgiven of millions of dollars. And then he sees somebody and they owe him hundreds of dollars and he has them thrown in jail even though he was just forgiven millions, right? The idea is easy to understand there. When we are compassionate, we receive mercy, and we don't give it to other people, it's clear that we don't understand it ourselves. And so we have to be willing to give it. This is the way that I would ask us to understand that mercy is a gift you should share. Some of us in a few weeks are going to see this scenario play out in real time, and I'll describe it to you, and some of you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Christmas morning will come, and we will have presents for multiple children under the tree. And for about, I don't know, maybe an hour or two, our kids will think that their gifts are the coolest. And then they'll look at what their brother or their sister is playing with. And they'll go, well, I want to try that toy for a while. And that scenario is going to play out one of two ways. They're going to walk over and they're going to ask to play with it. Maybe your children do that, mine don't. Ask to play with it. And they're going to say, sure, you can play with this, right? And they're going to share. The other scenario is they're going to walk over and take it from the sibling, and there's going to be a war that happens in your living room, right? We depend. I'm this way, right? You're this way too. Whether it's something that we want to share with our kids or share with somebody else, or you know that person at work, when they walk away with your stapler, it's not coming back, and so you will say, "No, I actually don't want to share this with you because I need." Or there's a neighbor that borrows stuff from your garage, and you're like, "That's gone forever," right? All that stuff can happen. We decide whether we think we should share or not. And sometimes it's dependent on the other person. And in some ways, it makes sense, right? It should be, if you're going to let someone borrow your car, you want to make sure they're a responsible driver. Like, I'm not saying don't do that. But here's the thing. When we know and understand the mercy and the compassion and the forgiveness that God has given to us, he says the standard then is that we show that same kind of mercy and forgiveness and compassion to other people. Because he's the standard. Not what we want, not what we think is fair, not what we trust the other person to do with that mercy or compassion, but that we would be the ones that divvy it out because we understand what we've been given. And so when we receive mercy and we understand it to be true, it's one that we share with other people. We say, hey, I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to show you mercy. I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to be patient because God has been that way with me. Here's the third one. That we would walk humbly. We've talked about both of these verses over the last year, actually, because we were in Proverbs and we were in 1 Peter. So Proverbs 18:12 says this: haughtiness goes before destruction. Humility precedes honor. If we think we're going to do everything the right way, we're prideful, we're just going to run, no input, no guardrails, just go for it. What the writer of Proverbs says is you're heading for destruction, man. You think you can run the race and have nobody else in your corner, nobody else helping you along the way? Destruction. But then he says humility precedes honor. When we understand and we are humble, it will move us in the right direction. 1 Peter 5:6 says this: so humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time, he will lift you up in honor. Listen, here's the thing. When we think we can have this exchange with God, and if we do what's right, he's just going to level us up. He goes, that's actually the opposite. We do what he asks us to do, and we make sure we're submitting to him, and we love mercy, and we do what's right and just. We deny ourselves, and we say, in humility, we submit ourselves to God, and we don't expect us and our abilities to move ourselves up the ladder, but we say, if God is going to honor me, then so be it. If not, then so be it. If you think about it, there are plenty of people. We think about people that are well known. We're like, oh yeah, they've got status, they've been able to work their way up the ladder, they've got money, they've got all stuff, right? Think about the people that you know, probably, that live their lives in submission to God and no one knows it but you and your family, but you love those people. Nobody talks about them. There's no newspaper article, there's no article written online, there's no YouTube video, there's nothing. But you know that they lived their lives and they submitted themselves to God, and because of that, God worked through them in great and miraculous ways. But no one's going to write about them on anything. But you know them. You think about this, it's not about being honored outside of God's kingdom. It's about being honored within God's kingdom, allowing God to move us in that direction. If we understand humility in a different way, I think that this is a good way of understanding it. That humility is self-awareness on display. It's just saying, I know I don't have all the answers. I know I'm not perfect. And I'm willing to admit it. And I'm willing to say, I get it. Like, I understand, like, God's the one in control. I need to submit myself to him. And we just say, I just have to be self-aware of who I am and not continue to push myself forward. And I would take it one step further and say this, that spiritually maturing people become more and more self-aware in their relationship with God. This doesn't all happen right once, right? You don't come to know Jesus and then all of a sudden you are the most humble person on the planet. It's not that way. And some of us are more humble from the beginning. Like it's just, we have a predisposition to be humble, we have a predisposition to be prideful. It just is the case. But there's this idea that we would mature and we would continue to pursue God in a way where we would become more and more self-aware of the fact that he is God and we are not. We become more and more self-aware that he's the provider and we're the one that submits to him. We become more and more self-aware that it's not all about us, but it's supposed to be about him. And if we're continually maturing, I would say this to you, that our humility should grow deeper and deeper and deeper as we grow in our relationship with Jesus. And if it's not, I would ask us to stop for a second and say, why is that not happening? Why am I not continually finding myself in more humble submission to God? And how do we need to work on that? I would drive us to the scriptures and say, depend on God. Like, do things that say, I am not the center of this, and place God at the center of your life. You know, we looked at Micah 6, and Jesus would actually have a callback to this. So if we go to Matthew 23, verse 23, this is what Jesus says. It says, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites. For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the more important aspects of the law: justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. This is what he's talking about. So the tithe, we would talk about that and we would say the way we understand it today is 1/10 of our income. That's usually the way we process it. There was other ways that they kind of saw income thousands of years ago, and part of that was many people had gardens. Some people have gardens today. Many people don't. We live in an agricultural society, but we don't need it to survive. We can still go to the grocery store, which was not necessarily the case for them as much. And so they think about it and they would literally take 1/10. Like if you have an herb garden, they would separate out. They would go 10% goes to God, and I can keep the rest. That's the way they would do it. And they would do it so finely, especially the Pharisees. They would take this fine-tooth comb idea, and they would just make sure they've got 10%, and then they would take the rest of it. They go, okay, this is mine. And so they were so careful to make sure it was exactly 10%. And what Jesus is talking about is he looks at this and he goes, you guys are so careful to just make sure that you've got your 10%. You make sure that you take care of all the stuff and you make sure God has it, but you've forgotten the other parts. And this is where Jesus gives us the callback to Micah 6. Right? He talks about justice or doing what's right and loving what is just. He talks about the idea of mercy or loving mercy. And he talks about this idea of faith. And honestly, when we think about it, when we walk humbly with God, there is a faith aspect to that where we go, I'm not in charge and I'm trusting God there. And so Jesus says, these are the things. He draws this forward from Micah 6 and says, these are the things you have to remember. He says you should tithe, but you neglect the more important things. Listen, this is important. God cares what you give. God cares about it, right? He cares that we do what's right. He cares that we do what we are called to do and what he says we should do. But this is the more important thing. God cares more about your heart. And the idea of loving justice or doing what's right and loving mercy and having faith or walking humbly, those are all heart postures. They're not just things that we can transactionally take care of, that we just give God what we're supposed to give and then he'll be happy with us. I've talked before about all the different jobs I have, and around this time of year, I'm always reminded of the Black Friday I worked at Best Buy. Back when they actually used to have lines and all this stuff. That Black Friday, I worked, we opened at midnight. I worked midnight to 6 a.m., and then I worked 6 p.m. to midnight. So we were open 24 hours, and I worked 12 of them. And so it was very interesting, one of the most interesting nights of my life, honestly. The people that come through and check out at 3 a.m., they're the most interesting people you will ever meet. I'll just say that, okay? But having worked in that world as well, especially at a time when stores were big on opening early and being the first ones and all of that kind of thing, it was all based on the transaction. And there was those things like when you go through the line at places and there's all the little things that your kids want to grab off the shelves and stuff. We would call them impulse buys, and they were there for a reason. And there was even the things when I was at Best Buy where we sold a protection plan for everything. Don't ever buy those, by the way. They're not worth it. And so then but here's what they would do. They would actually incentivize us to sell them. And so whoever got the most protection plans sold on Black Friday got a gift card at the end of the day. Okay, I don't think I won. But it was one of the things. It was all about the transaction. We wanted people to spend the most amount of money, spend the most amount of time in the store, make sure that they got this and that and whatever. It was always all about that. Listen, this is the way that it works. We see this way it works around. That retail is built on transactions, but relationships are built on trust. The relationships that we have that are going to be the deepest and most meaningful are never built on transactions. They're built on trust. As I think this through in my own life, and I think that you would have things in your life this way as well, the people that would call you and say, will you come and help? And your thought process is, what am I going to get out of this? They're probably not a very close relationship to you. If they say, I'll bring pizza, and you're like, all right, fine, I have to eat today, then I'll go help you, right? You're like, that's probably not the best relationship. But the people that call you, and they're like, can you come help me? And they're like, yes. Or they call you, yes. It's just an automatic yes. They call you, you say you're in, you call them, they're in. Why? Because there's a depth of relationship there that is built not on the transaction. The conversation is not, well, what will you do for me? It's built on trust and love and saying, I'm not in it just because you're going to do something nice for me because you owe me now. It's built on the idea that we love and trust and want to build that relationship within one another. I want to go to Hebrews 11 for a second. There's a man by the name Enoch that was in the Old Testament. He's one of only 2 people to never die. He was taken to heaven. Him and Elijah is the other one. And so Hebrews 11, verse 5, 6, this is what it says. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. He disappeared because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. Time out. Just think that through for a second. Would you be known as someone who pleased God? And if your answer in your head is no, you've probably worked on the humble piece a bit. That's good. But there's still time. Right? There's still time to change how we interact with God and what that looks like. But this is how Enoch was understood. Then it says this, and it is impossible to please God without faith. It's impossible. So the way that we please God is through faith. And this is then what it says. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. The first week, this is why we started week 1 of this series. And we said that we have to understand whether God exists. That's the first step. We have to look and say, do we trust God? Do we have faith in him? We have to first of all believe that God exists. And then it says that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. This is what it doesn't say. And he rewards those who give enough money. And he rewards those who serve enough times. And he rewards those who go to church enough. And he rewards those who live this way or that way or know the words or dress. He doesn't say that. He says he rewards those who sincerely seek him. What does that look like? That's not transactional relationship. That's transformational. That's relational information. That's a relationship that's built when we sincerely seek him. It's not a transaction where we can just keep God happy or satisfy him with what we can do. It's an understanding and building of relationship through sincerely seeking him. I want to take the last few minutes today. We're going to learn a Greek word, all right? So you didn't know that was coming today? Here you go. You're going to learn a Hebrew word next week, okay? So if you're liking this stuff, great. Don't not come back because I'm going to teach you Hebrew, by the way. Just come back anyway. It'll be fun. Here's the word, okay? We're going to put it up in Greek, but it'll also be in English, and then the translation will be up there. So this is the word. The word is tetelestai. There it is in Greek. So if you can read that in Greek, good for you. I used to be able to at one point in my life. But the way it's tetelestai, and the translation is this. It is finished. This is what Jesus said on the cross. So when he says it is finished and he gives up his spirit, this is the word he likely said. This was the reference that he makes. Now we think about that, and if you understand that understanding of the scriptures and knowing that Jesus said that, we think about that in the one context. But there's not just one context to actually understand this word. There's at least 3 more. Here's how we would understand the 3 different definitions of this. The first one is it is accomplished. Second one is it is fulfilled. The third one is it is paid in full. Here's how we understand this. When we think about it is accomplished, it's thinking about a mission. So when you've got a mission that someone gives you, someone says, your husband or wife says, hey, we've got these errands, can you go do the things, right? And you have to go to this store and this store and this store and this store. And they text you and they say, are you done yet? And you say, mission accomplished, right? You got all the things done. This is the idea that Jesus came to earth. He came to earth to live a sinless life, to die on a cross, and he was saying that part of the mission is accomplished. He was saying that part of the mission is done. But then there's the second part, saying it is fulfilled. When we think about that, we look back to the Old Testament, and we look at the way God laid out the plan, and there was prophecy after prophecy pointing to Jesus, pointing that he would be someone from the line of David, that he would die a sinner's death, that he would then rise again. Like, all of this is true. So it's not just that the mission is accomplished, but the things that have been talked about and prophesied, those things would be fulfilled. And then there's the third one, that it is paid in full. That the debt that was owed because of sin is now completely and totally paid for. There is no more payment needed. All 3 of these things are true when Jesus says tetelestai. And this is what I want us to understand, that Jesus paid the transaction so we could experience transformation. When we come and we say, you know what, I just want God to be happy with me, so I'm going to do the things that I just want to make sure that I'm on God's good side. I want to make sure that I do all the right things and make sure I'm at the right places and make sure I pay enough. And we try and do these things. And Jesus would be standing there going, what are you trying to pay for? The payment's done. Even when we come and we say, and we should do this, right? We confess sin and we apologize to God. Scripture tells us that Jesus is there at the right hand of God going, God, I already paid for it. Here's the receipt. It's already paid for, it's forgiven, it's done, it's over. There is no more need to feel like we need to pay God for anything. Jesus paid all the debt that we could ever rack up, and it's done and it's over. And we can't pay anymore, but that leads us to the place where we should understand and say, I want a relationship that's transformational. I said this a little bit before, I want to say it again. The most meaningful relationships are never transactional, they are transformational. Think about for a moment the people that you have known in your life that have transformed your life. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a pastor, maybe it was an aunt or an uncle. Anybody in that, maybe it was a youth leader, whatever it was, right? They've transformed their life. Here's what I know they didn't do. They didn't look at you and invest in you and then one day say, here's the bill to pay me back for all the things I did for you. They didn't say, you know what, I showed up for you so I could really use you to show up for me. They said, I'm just going to be all in. I'm going to give you what I can give you. I'm going to work hard to influence your life in a positive way. And I'm going to expect nothing in return. Listen, we can be these kind of people to others as well. When we decide we're going to do what's right, even when it's not what we would naturally choose, we decide we're going to love mercy, we're going to share that with other people, we're going to walk humbly with God, we have the opportunity through that relationship with Jesus to then be that person to somebody else. And it creates this meaningful relationship where we are striving to have a relationship with God and we're causing other people to strive to have that relationship as well. But it causes us to understand that our relationship with God is not just a transaction. It's not something we have to get up every day and we have to pay the right amount or make sure we say the right prayers or read enough passages of Scripture. It's not about that. It's a transformation that moves us to a place where we would say, what's most important to me is following who God is. And saying those decisions I make every single day I'm going to make, not because I feel like I have to make sure that I get the jelly beans on the right side of the scale, but because I know and understand this meaningful relationship I have with God. You know, we get to this time of year every year, right? And we start to think about, or maybe you've already started to buy presents for people, and you start to think about, and there's always those people that like, you don't know what to get them. And I'm getting to that point in my life where I'm like, what do I need? Like, I just have the things I need, like whatever. It's like hard. Like this person, and you think about people and you go, they have everything. What could they need? I think we should think about God that way a little bit more. When we think about what we're going to give God, do you understand that we can't give God anything he doesn't already have? Like he says, yeah, Jesus said, right? You should tithe. You should give back and be generous back because God has given to you so generously. Like we should do that. Does God need your money? No. Should we serve somewhere and make sure that we're there to love people and make sure we show the love of Christ? Yes, we should do those things. Does God need us specifically to do that? No, he can have anybody do that. We do these things because we love him. But there is one thing we can give God that he doesn't already have. This is the way I would think about it. There are 7 billion other people on the planet, but there's only one you. There's only one you. The only thing that you can give God that he doesn't necessarily have is your heart. And to say your life is going to be offered to him. And you will live your life doing what's right based on what he says. That you will live your life loving mercy and sharing it with other people. That you will live your life humbly walking with him. The other things we're called to do because we love God and we want to be a part of what he's doing. We want to honor him with our life. It goes into that doing what's right and just. But he doesn't need them. What he wants and needs most is our heart. And when he has our heart, those other things will follow. I said this earlier, I'll say it one more time. God wants transformation, not transaction. It's not about what we can do for him. It's not about keeping him happy. It's not about making sure we do what's right so God does what we need him to do and what we can get out of it. It's about a life that's transformed by an understanding of who he is, what he's done for us, and that Jesus has paid every debt we could ever owe on the cross. I'm going to ask the band to come back up, and I have one more question for us to think through, to kind of help us place this and say, what am I focused on? What's the thing that's most important to me? And I would ask it this way. Am I asking more from Jesus, or am I asking to be made like Jesus? Think about when you pray. What are the things you're focused on? Is it that he would show up and do what you want him to do? Is it that he would provide for the thing that you need provided for? By the way, all of those things, Scripture says bring to God. It's not bad, it's not wrong to bring those things to God. But ultimately, are we asking to be made like Jesus? Are we asking that we would be transformed and that our heart would reflect his? That we would live in a way that honors him with everything we have. And we would get out of that trap of the transactional relationship with God. Listen, if that's something that you've struggled with, right? You think if you don't do the right things, God is just angry at you. That he's going to be frustrated and you're worried because if he's frustrated at you, then bad things are going to happen. Like that's a lie. God, we talked about this last week, right? God, we said this. God thought of you and thought you were a good idea. God is unimaginably invested in who you are. And he is delighted that we exist. He wants our hearts the same way our parents wanted us to obey, not just because we were afraid of them, but because we loved them. The way that if you're a parent, you want your kids to listen and hear you out and be connected to you and understand you, not because you want them to be afraid of you or because you want to keep them from having fun, but because you love them and want what's best for them. We understand it that way. That's how God looks at us. And he doesn't want us just to show up and say, we're going to do all the right things and hope one day when we stand before God, we're just going to look at God and go, I hope I did the right stuff. That's not the way God wants to interact with us even today. He says, whatever beans you put on that scale have already been paid for. It's over. The question is, do we turn our lives over to him? What does God want from us? He wants us to do what he says right, even choose him, even when naturally we want to choose ourselves. We choose him. He wants us to love mercy. He wants us to say, well, we've been given mercy and compassion. We will give it to other people. And he wants us to walk humbly with him. To say, I'm not the most important person in any part of this story, but Jesus is. And I'm going to walk that step every day.